Stone Cold Prose, building better words.
Was Ronald Reagan wrong about communism? What's the relationship between nihilism, communism, and wokeism, and why does it matter now in 2024? Hi guys, welcome back to Stone Cold Prose, where we build better words, better thoughts, and better men. I'm Miles Watson, novelist and author of numerous award-winning series, including Cage Life, Sinner's Cross, and The Chronicles of Magnus. I worked in Hollywood for 12 years, law enforcement for another 10, and now I break it all down and build it back better. So let's get into this. Now, Ronald Reagan, who I happened to meet once when I was a teenager, famously remarked that the Soviet Union was a godless, evil empire. Now, the first part of this remark was largely true. Though contrary to popular belief, religion was legal in the Soviet Union. However, it was persecuted with great vigor, especially under Stalin. Go figure. And the Soviet government threw considerable resources into discouraging and ridiculing the practice for the whole of the Soviet Union's existence. As to the latter, the belief the Soviet Union, or any communist state, was or is an empire is actually nonsense. Sure, there are superficial similarities, in the sense that the Soviets were autocratic, territorially aggressive, and discouraged any type of nationalistic feeling among the people that they subjugated by force. But there the similarity ends. As Vladimir Bogdanovich Rezun, who writes under the pen name Viktor Suvorov, has pointed out, empires are first and foremost commercial ventures. The purpose of an empire, any empire, is economic exploitation. Imperialists conquer sovereign lands so they can harvest their natural resources and utilize the local population as slave labor. All other considerations are secondary, no matter how important they might seem, taken out of context. The Soviet Union, however, was a land of almost unlimited natural resources to begin with. She swam with oil. She bulged with coal. She had the most fertile agricultural land in all of Europe. She had staggering wealth in minerals, ores, timber, virtually unlimited fresh water, plenty of fish, plenty of game. You name it, she had it in abundance. She was by far the largest country in the world, encompassing no less than 13 time zones. And with the exception of the fact that she lacked a warm water port, she really didn't need any more territory than she already had. Nor did she need any more citizens, that's for sure. No, the Soviets actually wanted for almost nothing in raw materials. And yet their foreign policy, particularly under Stalin, but really all the way through to the very end of the Soviet Union, Gorbachev, was incredibly aggressive. She not only occupied a number of countries by force and ruthlessly crushed uprisings anywhere they occurred, she spent vast sums financing revolutionary movements in Europe, in Asia, in Africa, and in the Americas. It's worth noting that the symbol of Soviet power, a globe with a hammer and sickle on it, has no borders, because the goal of Marxism itself was world revolution. Now, notwithstanding the fact that Lenin, Trotsky, and Stalin generally viewed the writings of Marx as little more than a means by which they could seize arbitrary power for themselves, the fact is that world revolution was necessary for the Soviet Union in order for it to survive. Mr. Rezun, who was a former Soviet officer and spy who defected to the West in the 70s, noted that the inevitable result of imposing communism on people was that they would eventually try to escape it. This, in turn, would force the government to build walls to keep them in and to put guards with guns on the walls. But because people can dig under walls and bribe guards, defection is always a problem, especially among people like doctors and scientists and athletes and artists who could live much more comfortable lives anywhere else. But worse than these defections is the fact that when your people are underfed, when they lack basic freedoms, when they have to wait 7 years for a crappy apartment and 9 years for an even crappier automobile, and their clothing falls apart in the rain, and at any moment they can just be sent to a labor camp because somebody felt like it, the very existence of countries where people live better and have more freedom is a nightmare for the communist bosses. Why? It puts ideas in people's head. Ideas that maybe they could have a better life at home if only the communists would just go away. See, you can seal borders, but you cannot prevent information from traveling over them. It simply cannot be done. The Soviets knew the rest of Europe was better off than they were. They knew it. And rather than raise the standard of living in their own lands and allow more freedoms for the people, which of course the communists could not and would not do, they had no choice. They had no choice but to try and impose communism everywhere. Once that was accomplished, once there was no longer a better standard of living anywhere in the world, there was no place for anybody to go. There wouldn't be any need for walls. No need for guards, no need for guns. Because there'd be no freedom anywhere, not even in your own mind. Now, what does this have to do with wokeism? Well, all left-wing political movements of the last 175 years draw at least some water from the well of Marxist teachings. This water may amount to a few droplets or a whole fucking tanker truck, but it's fair to say that there is some level of conscious or unconscious Marxian influence in any political movement which is much left of center. It's usually possible to trace this lineage by how strongly the movement espouses certain beliefs. By their works ye shall know them. Well, wokeism, it could be argued, is an outgrowth of the neo-Marxist movement that arose when the holes in original Marxist theory became a little bit too big for even the most fanatical follower to ignore. The central tenet of neo-Marxism, in its own words, is that there is a conflict between social equality and the liberty of some people, but that should not stand in the way of the pursuit of social equality. To simplify, and admittedly, perhaps to oversimplify, the neo-Marxist believes that when push comes to shove, individual freedom is simply less important than leveling the socioeconomic playing field. Now, like many communistic theories, this sounds fairly reasonable until you see it put into practice in any form whatsoever. Because sooner or later, social equality demands that both property rights and the right to hold opposing opinions be suppressed or abolished for the good of the people, which is fine maybe if you happen to be one of the people who gains from this and not one of some people who does not. When wokeism first became a thing, it was defined as simply being sensitive to racial and social justice and societal hypocrisy. Now, it's hard to argue against that, and I wouldn't. But as with any Marxism, as with Marxism itself, there's a huge gulf between theory and practice. And in practical terms, what woke has come to mean is that you either agree with and espouse their doctrines in regard to race, sex, gender, politics, economics, and all the rest of it, or you're the enemy and should be canceled. As Lenin himself once said, the war must be waged for real, or it must not be waged at all. There can be no middle ground here. The fact is, the wokeists don't give a damn if imposing what they call social justice destroys your liberty, because liberty is not their aim. On the contrary, like their communist forefathers of yesteryear, their goal is the imposition of a set of beliefs upon society, whether society wants them or not. And beyond that, whether they actually work in practice or they don't. Because the deeper underlying motive here has never been about ideology itself. The original Bolsheviks, Lenin and Trotsky and their gang, I said before, they were Marxist, yeah, but they were heavily influenced by the nihilist movement of the 18th century. It was from the nihilists that they drew their core identity. Well, who were the nihilists? The nihilists were Russian revolutionaries who hated the Tsar and wanted him overthrown, and the whole imperial system with him. So, well, what distinguished them from ordinary revolutionaries was that they had no further ambitions than this. Most of them didn't give a damn if anything sprang from the ashes or not. They were so full of resentment, anger, and hatred for the world, they just wanted to see it all burn. In their later years, Lenin and Trotsky both admitted that their revolution amounted to a gigantic experiment carried out with hundreds of millions of human lives, and that they had no real idea where any of this was going. Oops. Sorry about all those dead people. Well, at the core of wokeism is a desire not only for arbitrary power, but a cartoonish indifference to the effects of that power on actual human beings. Wokeism is ultimately a movement, I'm sorry to say this, by people who never got picked in gym class. It's a movement of outsiders, of outcasts, of have-nots, of resentful basement dwellers, of people who never fit in or had any influence, and who see the movement as a fast track to power and a means for revenge for real or imagined insults. And as I've said before, resentful people who want to change the world are not to be trusted. In storytelling, it's often said that the hero and the villain are both created by pain. There's a quote that goes, "The difference is that the hero uses his pain and the villain is used by it. The hero says, 'I will never let this happen to anyone else.' The villain says, 'The world hurt me, so I will hurt the world.'" And that's what this really comes down to. It's the kid who tragically got bullied on the playground growing up to become an even bigger bully. Look, folks, we all have our pains. We all have our struggles. We've all felt lonely in a crowd, or undervalued, or bullied, or marginalized, or exploited. I know I have. Life, as Ernest Hemingway observed, breaks the good and the bad impartially. It does not discriminate. But my own pains and defeats and humiliations, while they may provide motivation for my novels and this YouTube channel, are not an excuse to impose my belief systems on anyone else. And that is precisely what wokeism aims to do. Like communism, it seeks to create a world in which there is only one opinion and there can be no refuge from it, no escape, not even through popular culture, not even through imagination. And that was why the Soviet Union was not an empire, but something much worse and far more dangerous, a killer of possibilities, a killer of hope. And that is why the war on woke is so important to anyone who believes in freedom. If you enjoyed today's video, please remember to like, subscribe, comment, hit the notification bell, and remember to check out my books on Amazon. Link is in the description. See you next time. Until then, stay cool.